We're doing a Facebook Live. Everybody favorite the Facebook Live over there. We had some people request that couldn't be here, request that we book live. So we're actually live streaming this today. So I've had a couple of questions about, well, hey, what happens if we have to get out early, you know, and I'll work on this in just a second. Here and why these why in the world they mean something. I'll put this on in just a second when we get to it. So what I got here, let me tell you more about the situation. Sorry, Facebook world, have a little technical difficulties out there, but we care about you. Let me out here.
This over.
Thanks, guys. You're awesome. Sorry about that. Wish you were here. I'm going to give you a little more time. We've got 1 minute on the clock, teams. And just chat for a second if you're an overachiever. Jen, if you're an overachiever and you're finished already, just, she looks friendly. Talk to each other. You're the devil. We've got a photographer sneaking around the room. So we're doing Facebook Live. So yeah. 15 seconds. Four seconds. All right. Let me see what you guys have. Hold up the boards. Hold up the boards. 500, the largest class size. Average, okay. 70, large. I think you guys got it swapped around, but we still love you. 50, 85, average is 40. Largest class size is 30, average is 25. 44, 30, 25 and 7, 40 and 25. How about my back crew, my back row? We got, these are the trouble students. This is our student crew. They don't actually teach, but they corral a bunch of people. Okay, so 500, wow, if I should have had a candy bar to throw to you guys. Who has the 500 person classes? God bless you. Yes, we will be talking about engagement techniques. So we will be talking about engagement techniques. If you notice, hopefully you're already starting to pick up a few things that are going on here. I did leave my directions, my instructions, a little bit intentionally vague. Also, some of you were not paying attention properly when I gave directions because you were excited about doing something. And so I heard a few of you saying, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And then I put the instructions on the screen and you're like, oh, and it's clear. So we're going to be talking about why we did this in just a second, because this is, like I said, best case scenario. Like you chose to be here. You're actually instructors. You're only you're mischievous, but you're only slightly troublemaking in here. But this is worst case. Oh, no, I know. I've got my eye on you. But this is kind of the scenario that we have, only with you. It's times 50 on the class size. So we'll talk about what we did here, but just kind of be thinking about what's going on in class and what you're noticing and how you're interacting, because the students will kind of be the same way. Here's one of my classes that we decided to make fully interactive. And if you notice the whole back row, I did not notice until we started teaching that once you walked a few steps into the class, once you got to a certain point, the mic cut out. So they knew it was like we were tethered. We could never walk past halfway. So the whole back row was just like, they had that set up. So for those of you who have smaller classes, that may not be how to add activities in. It may just be how do we get people interacting and bring in engagement that don't normally talk? How do we bring in those people? And hopefully you're already starting to see, like even with this situation, we got even my back row rebels. We got you engaging somehow. You haven't talked to me directly yet, but you've interacted with your group and your group has participated. All right. So when I was given this situation, we decided, what do we do with this? Like, what do we do with this mess? We've got hundreds of people in a classroom. How do we deal with it? So just to let you know what we did, we decided we wanted to really focus down to like core things to teach. We decided we couldn't go out and just teach. We couldn't do activities for this breadth of topic. So we have to figure out what are the things that we think are important enough to really to bring application in the classroom, to reiterate. So we had to say, okay, focus. We had to look at every week, what is the most important concepts? Let's bring application to that theory, because we don't have time to do every single concept. Some of those textbooks are like 700 pages. You cannot do an activity over all of that. So focus, we wanted to bring application in. We wanted students to create things. This is just kind of a personal side note. I noticed where a lot of my students were really good at like the case studies where they would critique other people. Like my social media class, they're really good about ripping apart other accounts. Like they're like, oh, that's terrible. Like that's the worst thing we've ever seen. And I'm like, well, you create something. And they're like, oh, no, but that person's bad. Like totally, that's totally terrible. So it was this whole dynamic of we want them not just critiquing, but we want them in classrooms creating something. And then, of course, we want to figure out how do we get that engagement in. So the way we set this up, and your classes may not be structured exactly like this, but maybe you can kind of relate to part of it. Yes. I can get, yes, you will. How, I'm not sure, but we will find a way. Absolutely. Yes. So yeah, don't worry about writing down all this stuff. So what we decided to do was in class, at least one day a week, we would do a short topic review. And then we would have a case study, a very short case study, where they would hear from a real life company and they would apply something. So they would solve a case. So what we decided to do is we would create engagement within teams, like you were just doing. And then we would set up activities that we're going to talk about to have engagement between the teams. And then we would have learning recap with the instructor this way. And then I would do something, if we had time at the end, we would do something called a one sentence takeaway, where we would have learning back this way. It sounds crazy and confusing, but it just changed things, because the way we had the class before was, it was like one up and talk. And then about 6 weeks in, the students would take a multiple choice test. So we had engagement here. Well, I don't know if you call that engagement really. We had talking, and then 6 weeks later, we had students regurgitating it back on the multiple choice test. This way, in the course of one session, we would have me do a topic review, engagement within groups, engagement between groups, learning recap from what I'm seeing this direction, and then engagement back. And it just created a different energy. Like already I'm feeling the energy from this workshop, and it feels different. And once you start adding some of these small elements in, or you may be doing that already, we'll be hearing from you guys, because it's engaging. But just the energy from it, you don't want to go back to teaching the other way, because this is actually fun to teach as well. All right. So we have classes that are 50 minutes. Some of them are an hour and 15, but they're shorter, all the way up to 3 hours. And then, we have the short sessions. Yeah. Well, you may not. In the shorter sessions, what we would do is, we would do this piece in the first day, and then some weeks we would pull out this for the second day. So maybe they created things in class the first day, and we would send them home and say, get your best ideas together, create them, bring them back the next day. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So and this is something that perfect. You're ahead of me on slides that we'll be talking about is anything, any behavior you want, you reward. So I set it up in a huge competition. Like it is cutthroat. And if they bring it the next day, and if they don't have whatever they're supposed to bring, so if they're creating product packaging, if they don't bring it, then they can't compete against the other teams. And usually they're frantically running to the computer lab, because that means they have no chance at winning any points, and they're dropping down. We have a leaderboard going, and we're giving them points, and they drop down. And Emma's nodding back there. It's cutthroat. Once you start dropping them down and they start getting to the bottom, if you put points to it, I guess if they choose to do it, then that's fine. But most students, if you put points to it, it'll kick them in gear. It depends how you want to do it. I put at least a few points on it, because I like to put a few points to it. I like to make it hurt slightly. It makes it fun. So I've done it a couple of different ways. We have what? Well, hey, I'm not saying I'm going like full on Hunger Games in class. I mean, but I put a competitive element in mine, and the competitions end up being like for like 4% of the class when I do it. There's another teacher that's doing it for a much larger portion of the class. But even just having a little bit, worth just a little bit of points, it's not. It's funny. It's not even relative to how many points it is. It's just the fact that there's something attached to it. And then also the competitive people, once they start dropping down the board, Emma is a nasty, nasty person who will cut throat in the classroom. They slaughtered the competition. But as long as you make it into a competition, even if you don't have points attached to it, once they get into the habits, once they see that the environment of the classroom is interactive, you'll be surprised at how many of the students kick in and be a part of this. So let me show you a little bit about what the first part of this looks like in a class. I get a little excited with students when we're doing this. I may have grabbed my iPhone and taken some of these shots in the classroom. Some of you may have seen this short piece playing at our booth, but I want to show you what I mean. So we put really short cases because we wanted but this could be anything, any sort of case where they can solve or activity that they can do. I actually brought part of the brainstorming sessions into the classroom. That way I could go around to the different groups and discuss it. So some classes you could choose to keep this first part outside of the class and have them work on it at home, or you could bring this part into the classroom. A lot of times you give them homework, like work on your cases at home. Well, you can actually start it out brainstorming in the classroom, or have a piece of a day to where you brainstorm inside the classroom. After that, like I said, I like to have them create things as much as I can, either some physical product or some illustration. This won't work for all topic areas, but in marketing, usually there's something you can do to say, okay, bring what you said to life somehow. So this is one thing. Once I put a competitive element on it, I know we're going to talk about this later, but I didn't ask for this actually. These teams created this beyond what I asked for because we turned it into a competition, and they realized they weren't going to win if they turned in what everyone else was going to do. So they started getting creative and saying, oh, dang it, there are 50 other teams in this class. Like if they were in the job market, I look like everybody else. How am I going to stand out? So they started doing things like this that I didn't ask for, and they started overnighting product materials and you know what? It cost them $20, but they won, and I was really proud of them. And I could recommend them to an employer because I know that's the style of work that they do. So I had them do something like this. This is product packaging. It's not the most professional, but it's something that they created. They had to think through it and create it. And the next piece, so as you can see, kind of this is what we're dealing with. I love to have it to where their teams were not just critiquing, but creating something. The next piece I said was we bring them back in for engagement between the groups to discuss or compete in some way. And I just want to show you some, just to kind of get you thinking. I love to find ways in the activities to bring things to life. So I just wanted to show you a little activity that we did. If you've done any type of like team-based learning, like gallery walks, has anybody done a gallery walk? Okay, you've done a gallery walk? Okay, this is kind of, a gallery walk is where if you picture an art gallery and you go around and look at all the pictures, a gallery walk is where you have each team like bring whatever they created or their best idea, and all the other teams go around and look at the items. And then of course, as you can probably guess, in my class, we voted on them for winners. But this is, with this team, they were doing market segmentation, and they were choosing a target market segment and then creating a buyer persona from it. And this is so cool here because you guys actually know what those words mean. Usually when I'm at teaching conferences, it's more than marketing professors, so they didn't know that. So we did a reverse gallery walk, only we had them become the buyer persona. And you'll see one person from each group going around and Notice the classroom. Notice that there's very little oversight. There's a countdown in the background, and the students are, I mean, they're bringing out the accent. They're into it. So the other groups are interviewing the buyer persona from the other group. Does that make sense? Just kind of watch it and see what you think here. I don't know if you can hear them or not. You'll notice the only person who's not really paying attention is that guy, and that's my TA because he's not sure what to do. Got countdowns going on. It's pretty structured. Like, this isn't staged and they're not hired. Like, this is just, this classroom is a smaller one for us. It's about 70 in that classroom. And it's a nice size for running stuff like this. Any questions just about this? I know we're getting ready to get into tips, and I'm just showing you some stuff. Yes. It is harder. This is the best situation. This is after they built our new business building. We did this in a class of 250 in stadium style seating. We tried different ways, and I have a slide on what we screwed up on. But the stadium style was harder. We could still do it. I was worried about them falling over sometimes. But in those classes, if we could find an area in a foyer or a hallway, or usually down front, there was an area, we had to be really creative. I'm stubborn. We still pulled it off. It's just, it's like the layout is against you. You're fighting against it instead of it helping you, I guess. A couple of things notice is this, I added some structure to it that we're going to talk about that really helped. The timers helped, but they're pretty engaged with it. Like, they're good to see. Yes.
Yeah, so I feel like if I were to do something like this, then I could have more a number of groups talking about where the party's at, or working on some project for another class. So like timer keeps them focused, I guess it's deliverable.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, like I'm just trying to think, like I love it, but I don't see it working.
Okay, well, I don't know about working perfectly, but you should at least try it. A few things that we do, most students, if they know that you're trying to make class interactive, like they'll go with it because they want a more interesting class. But we had it very structured. So I found out what works better here, the timers. So they have 2 minutes for each one. Like it's going, we keep things at a pretty fast pace. Also, I have, okay, you guys have 1 minute to come up with 5 questions that you're going to ask the people when they come around. I usually have a list of like 3 questions that they start with. So and these are things that I just picked up after a time that helps it go better for the students who are like, we don't know what to ask. So you kind of learn, here's how we provide structure, but still allow creativity. So for this one, like I said, we keep it a pretty fast pace. We say, here are the 3 questions that you're going to ask. Here's what's going to happen. And we keep it at a fast pace. Like they don't, it usually does, like the person from the other group stands in front of them. And also their person is being represented and going around. So, and they don't want to look ridiculous. Like, so you know what? I haven't seen too much of that in the classes where we got up to 300 and there wasn't a lot of structure. You do have students kind of wandering off, but in classes under 100 or classes of 150, it usually goes pretty well. Yeah. How do you get feedback? Okay. And this is great. You guys are going all over my topics here. So like what I do with this one is I like to hear from them as well. I'll be walking around, but I like to bring, I'll bring the buyer personas up at the end, and I'll have the other group say, well, who did you choose for a winner? Why? Like, right, you know, stand up if you chose them for a winner. Why? What was it about them? So I bring some of the students, I let some of the students do some of the teaching there. So I'll say, what was it about that segment that was the most strategic? What was about their what creativity element did they bring? And I just kind of listen. This is where it's not quite as structured. It is more ambiguous, but I kind of listen for, okay, what are they saying? What am I seeing as I'm going around? Or that one guy that got into it. with buyer personas, we say you have to know them so well that they come to life. He brought it to life. So that's kind of how I do it, is I get some feedback from the other students of what they've noticed. So it's like they're learning and then they're teaching the other students and they don't even realize it. So that's kind of why I like to bring them in on it. What's the prep time on like the whole thing? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a big question because it's kind of, it depends what it is. It was a lot of prep time creating the whole semester worth, but just adding in something like this, maybe 30 minutes for typing out any sheets and handouts that I want for the groups. But once you kind of have it set up, it's like if you've done class prep, it's like the first semester is a nightmare. The first semester is getting everything organized. But then afterward, every semester, it's kind of, okay, we're going to do gallery walk. I need to have, like if they're voting, I need to have voting cards, or I need to have, or something, some way for them to vote. And that's kind of the consistent prep time that I do.
Are there any interactive activities that you've done that you have been, well, you know, this is kind of like way to take that book and you do it this way to make it.
Do you mean with the technology piece, or the activities, or the cases, or?
Like one time like this, you know, asking them questions and having them write on the thing that can be relatively.
Yes.
Prep.
Yes.
Other
yes. So I wasn't sure which piece you were talking about. With the cases, we do have them through Stukent. With the competition and leaderboard, I created some technology for that, but it's currently only at our university. With the activities, absolutely. I had to hand this class over to a set of instructors after the semester. So we created a whole instructor guide with the activities that we use over and over. And one thing that we do is consistently use the same type of activity over and over, because once the students see it, now you know the whiteboard, now you know what's happening, it's easy. So that is available for free for download for anybody if you want to look through the activities that we consistently use, and you'll notice a few here. And then we'll have it for you at the end. I don't know if I get your email, I can just send it out to everybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. Yes. Yeah, I love that. And sometimes I assume like, oh, students, they're not a good student because they're not talking much. Well, that's not their style. And so that's why I like to add these different styles in so they can be a part. So real quick, let me jump into the practical stuff. Wow, we're still in my story part. That was a short part. So general tips, and again, throw out any comments or questions, and we can open it up at the end too for more. Here's some general tips, and then we'll go into large scale classes. And again, I can send out all these slides. I like to look for ways to show things visually, especially in the large classes. For my visual learners, I like to pull students up and act things out. We'll have a sticky note spectrum in a minute that you'll see. And this is what, Jen, what you mentioned, like repeat engagement activities. We use whiteboards a ton in the larger classes. Like you don't want to buy whiteboards, just have a blank sheet of paper that they use. It doesn't need to be fancy, but I tend to do the same activities over and over. We'll have 2 or 3 versions of a gallery walk throughout the semester. We'll do what we call one sentence takeaway, which we'll do in a second. We'll do those all the time. And it's funny because once you start doing those over and over, it's easy. It's not like, oh, what are we doing now? It becomes expected and they actually kind of lean into it. I remember one time in a class, we got to the end and I was like, okay, class, what do you think about this? And I didn't even try to do an activity. And they started bouncing up, like standing up around the room. And I was like, okay. And we're doing a one sentence takeaway. And it was cool because I was so used to begging them to interact and they'd become so used to it that instead of fighting, they were actually jumping into an activity that I hadn't planned. So if you think about the spectrum of activities, you have really like labor intensive, long activities, 15, 20, 30 minutes. And then you have stuff that I can throw in a class in less than 4 minutes, start to finish, be done with it. And that stuff I can use over and over, and it just peps the class up a bit. So I like to repeat engagement activities. And this kind of goes along with engagement. When you're adding ambiguous stuff into classes, one thing we noticed that as much as you could streamline, as much as you could keep the same pattern of like due dates or even the same pattern of how a case goes or activity, it just takes that cognitive load off. The first semester we tried it, we messed up on some stuff. I tried to do the whole case and activity from start to finish in under an hour. And we had some students, I was thinking like, this is cool. It's in the scale it, they die and like, they'll be great. No, we had students like full on sweating, like rashes, like it was too much. So we had to change some things around. And we noticed that the next semester, as soon as we could streamline those things and get it consistent, they could stop worrying about it and they could focus completely on creativity. Those are just some general tips that we found. And then we get into the larger class engagement. So here's what I found with this, and you guys can give me an amen on this on the larger classes. The larger the class, the tighter you plan. So you ask about how much prep work it takes. On my small classes, work. I had a class of 25. I was teaching overseas this spring, really small classes, 20 to 25. I woke up and walked into class, did everything on the fly. When we had the 300 people in the class, you need to plan it a little bit tighter. I used to do interactive corporate leadership training and training with high schoolers, and we'd have 400 to 500 17 to 18-year-olds in a gym for 4 hours straight. What you notice, there's a saying that my mentor there used to say is chaos happens in the cracks. And what we found was in the larger classes, or when you have a stadium full of high schoolers, where you lose them is where they're not doing something. The minute you're not sure where to go and you have like, oh, well, we'll just wait a couple of minutes. Boom, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on Fortnite, and they're gone, and you have to bring them back. So in the larger classes, yes, I do talk at this pace. We do go at a quicker pace, or we just have it scheduled to where we do one thing, then we do the next thing, and that really helps. Clarify when you ask about if we did the gallery walk, they'd be off doing something else. Having a set of instructions or having clarity, here's what we do in our intro classes, really helps. As much as we can put things on the screen and clarify or give instructions, it really helps them stay focused. And then, like I said, engagement shifts to in between groups instead of just here. I said it on a class recently where they did have, 30, 35 teams in the class, and they tried to interview each group individually. And about 40 minutes into it, I'm sorry, I was like, I know this material, I teach this material, and I need to leave now. I'm thinking the students, how are they, their eyes kind of glaze over. So that's why we say we need interaction this way, but as much as you can move it this way as well, it really helps. And then a couple things to tell you here. Directions on slides are printed. That's helped so much. One of our course designers, this is one of my big mess ups. I was trying to give them announcements. Hey guys, do this, now do this, no, please do this. And I did not realize that, again, the audio did not reach to the back of the classroom. So they're all sitting happy back there. I'm like, we're good. We have no idea what she's saying. You gotta be kidding me. So my course developer helper said, like, why don't you put them on the screen? It helps so much because then I even start playing things I need them to know before class starts. That way they're sitting there like, oh, something flashy pretty on the screen. What's that thing? We should watch it. It's already in their head. You know those questions that you've told them 5 times, at least 10. It's probably on the syllabus. You've announced it for 2 weeks about the exam coming up. What do they ask? First question. Well, what do they email you an hour before the exam? Do we need Scantron? Wait, what chapters are we supposed to study? So I try to put those things in print visually as much as we can. So here's an example of what we do. We do this for directions. We do this for announcements. This really helps for larger classes. Mess up on the words there, but if I have something I need them to know or announcements, like I'll have this playing over and over. Problem with this, way too fast. I messed up there. So the second round, I had to slow it down. My ESL students were like, what? They're trying to write down the words. It's too fast. Just things you learn. This cost me $6 on the website Fiverr. So there's a website called Fiverr. There are similar ones. It's Fiverr. I can actually create stuff like this, but I didn't have time. I was swamped. I paid $5 or $6 to expedite it. I know they messed up the 2 words, but at some point, honestly, I was really tired, and I'm like, they know what I mean. I put it on the screen. But for $6, I can reuse it every semester, and it's just something if you want to spend the money to add in to help. And it's a way to do things on the cheap, on a budget. If you don't have animation skills or your department's like, we don't have time for that. So, questions, comments? Oh. So that's one thing that we did with this. Also, with the activities, we learned really quickly any video that we played in class needed to have captioning, and I messed up on that because I played you one earlier that didn't have captioning. Oh man! And then one other thing I wanted to tell you. This is one of my favorites: visual and audio cues. Anybody know where I'm going with this? Not my back row. You guys know where I'm going with it. One thing that has helped so much with large classes doing engagement is to have some sort of cue for what's to happen. One thing that makes instructors scared and be scared is, you know that feeling with a class activity or a large class and you think, I may be on just teetering on the edge of chaos here. Like I may lose control of them in a minute. That is a risk that you take when you do activities in large classes. And so one thing you have to think of is, okay, once we get the energy going, how do we bring them back? How do we get their attention? And one thing that I found accidentally that's been really helpful is having some sort of cue. And you guys didn't know, you sort of perked up earlier when you heard it, and you may know what's going to happen when I click this. Any guesses? Make you want to bounce just a little bit, bounce with me, yeah. This is this cue is the main cue that I use. I don't know why I happened on it accidentally. I put anytime they're supposed to wrap things up, like so before class starts, at the end of an activity round, I'll usually have a countdown and then I'll crank that sucker up. And they won't, the other option, have you ever had that moment? Okay, how many of you guys have had the moment where you're standing in front of the class like, okay guys, quiet, everybody, come back. And it kind of makes you feel like you're losing your credibility at some point. Like, please, guys, please sit down, please. This kind of helps me. I also have a noise penalty that I give on the competition if I need to. That's like in my last resort in my back pocket. But usually what happens is I'll start playing, then I'll crank it up, and unconsciously, you'll see them kind of turn around. They won't even know, but they'll. Otherwise, like you have to stop them and tell them, or hey guys, we're done. But even if you have other music playing in the background, if you have something that you play every time to tell them like, wrap it up, let's go. I'm not saying it works 100% perfectly, but it helps a lot. It works pretty well in those big classes. Usually I have, yeah, about a minute is what I do on the longer activities. So I'll put a 30-minute countdown on if we're in a huge discussion round or something. And then on the last minute, like if you saw before class started today, on the countdown, when it hit the last minute, it switched to that and the volume went up. And so then they hear the music and they look up and they're like, oh, we've got a minute left. Usually it works pretty well. When you get to 300 people in a classroom, you got to crank the music up, you got to get them set down. But if you're in a class with like 50 or 60, use that every time. Use something like that, and it really helps. It really does. Then you can yell at them if you want to, if that hasn't worked, but it really helps. And then here's the fun part. This is some kind of practical things that I found that these are kind of some practical things I found that I use as specific activities. I don't know if you've ever had. Yes, I do actually. Here's my question for you. The last time that you ask a question in class and you're like, hey guys, what is a good example of product packaging that you've seen lately? When was the last time you had that, just a dreaded silence? Just the cricket. You guys we've all had that in class, right? How many of you have said, all right, I will stand you down. I can stay up here until I die until you answer. Like, come on, how many of you have like had a bad day and done that? Like, yes. We've all done that, and it's fine and it works eventually. But one thing that I found is adding little elements to like this in class, and I call them brainstorm boards. And oddly, it's something I added into class that helps me, and students actually write about it on the reviews at the end of class, like, oh, we really like that element. And I'm thinking that's the element that made you work more. But they really like it. So sometimes if I'll ask a question just off the top of my head in class, I'll say, hey guys, what's an answer of product package? What's the last package you got in the mail that you're like, this is really creative product packaging? And I'll ask you this, and if you're my class and you get pretty quiet, I'll say, all right, we'll do this real quick here. All right, guys, 30 seconds, talk to your groups. You can put on the countdown timer if you want or not, or you can even say 10 seconds. So I'll ask you guys real quick with your groups, write it on your boards. I'll give you 20 seconds. Write down the most creative product packaging you've seen lately. Go. Just hold the board, put it on your board, talk with your groups. You have 15 seconds. Go. Write it on your board. Most creative product packaging you've seen lately. My back row, you can do this too. Where's your board? Just one board per group is fine. Just one board per group is fine. 10 seconds. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. And Kinder? Oh, I thought you said Kinda. And hold your answers up. Hold your answers up. Banana leaf, Amazon Prime, lip balm, bag. Okay, interesting. Most product company, you can explain. Okay, so, but here's why I wanted to do this. Now, you can see a couple of things from here. You held up all of your boards. I don't know if you have that student in class that you ask them a question and they go down and you're like, oh no, please don't. Oh no, they're going there. Oh, we don't want to talk about that. Couple things happens here. If you raise your boards and 80% say the same thing, boom, that's a teaching moment. I can say, then we've got a different teaching moment than if I just ask one or two people. I can say, okay, you all said similar things. For instance, answer this question on the board real quick. Wipe off your board. 5 seconds. Ready? What's the first word that comes to your mind when I say this restaurant? Ready? McDonald's. Write it on your board. You have 5 seconds. 5. Write it board. 4, 3, 2, 1. Raise the boards. Gross. Fat. Ronald. French fries. Burgers. Yellow. Fast. Nuggets. Burger. Okay. So I've got a couple answers, unhealthy or fat. The point is like the reason why I like this is because you have to interact quickly with your whole team is interacting. But then I also get to see kind of a snapshot of what my entire class says. You said bag earlier. So now I know what type of student you are, what kind of answer you're going to give. I think you're a good student. So I would say, what do you mean by bag?
So when I order food, here's the hotel. it had packaging and it had all this other foo-foo stuff that I didn't need, and all I needed was food.
Okay.
That doesn't know what it's bad.
So,
The waste is killing trees. It's terrible for our environment.
you know, I like that you answered the opposite of my question, but you felt so strongly about it that you wanted to get it out. And as marketers, we need to talk about that. And we would, and it's killing me not to talk about it, but we're going to have to move on. What I like is instead of the standoff where there's this uncomfortable silence in the air, is suddenly we brought an energy back to the classroom. And I've involved you guys, and the whole class for a split second is involved, and you can take it any direction you want to go with it. Some people are like, how do I fill the time in class? I'm like, how do you stop talking? Like, there's so much stuff to do. I can take this a million directions. So I like to do that, honestly, especially if I'm super tired. Like if you've been working around the clock and you're like, oh, this lecture. So it seems like you're doing something cool when really you're just exhausted, but you're like, okay, you can do a 10-second thing to wake them up. You can say, make it a longer question, say 3 minutes. And bring it back, raise your boards. It's just something that I like to add in that has worked really well. Okay, I'm getting too excited. I just want to teach you guys. This is fun. The next one is popcorn. This is I said I like to show things visually and bring things to life. It's a way to do a concept. So if they're creating a coffee drink, I would have them do this to see who answered what. So popcorn is a simple one. And hopefully you're by your groups. Pick a person in your group, give them the board. Pick a person in your group, give them the board, just so they will be kind of the person to answer. This person's going to need to stand back up and sit back down quickly. All right, so pretend this is a case question. Here's what we're going to do. And again, once you do this once, they get it. You know, you're learning everything on the fly here. We don't put all the activities into one class. So if I do a round of popcorn, I'll say, you're going to be like popcorn, back up and back down. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to say, is this true for your group? If it's true, that one person stand up. And then I'll have you sit back down. That's it. So pretend like this. These are very serious questions on a case, you know. Okay, I want you to stand up. One person from your group, your popcorn. You're going to be the popcorn. Stand up if every person in your group had coffee this morning. Okay, and sit back down. Stand up if there are no morning people in your group. Okay. Stand up if there's at least one person in your group that is a little obsessed with sticky notes. Okay. All right. Everybody back down. Stand up. Stand up if you think Levi should continue to wear that fabulous fanny pack that he's been wearing. All right. And the people have spoken, sit back down and give Levi a hand. All right. So this is another one that you can add in. And see, once you know what we're doing, like it's easy. We could throw that in any class at any time. And it's just something, now you're standing back up, you've gotten some energy. They can pass the board to whoever wants to stand up. So if there's one person that's freaking out, frightened, or you can say, all right, pass the boards to another person if you're like, you will all interact with me. So however you want to do it. Has anyone done this one in class before? Popcorn? Okay, kind of a fun one. Next, how much time do we have? Okay. Oh gosh. All right. We're going to do this one real quick. I also do something called one sentence takeaway. I'll do that at the end, where very similar, except I like combining all these. So I'll say, what's one takeaway that if you could only have? I love doing this one. Like we've talked about this whole class. We've talked the whole class today. If you could take the best thing away from it, what's your one takeaway? It has to be shorter than a sentence. You have to say it in 2 seconds or less. Write it on the board, and then I want to have you stand up when you're ready. And we'll go around and do the class really quickly. And we can do that later. But it's another thing. They're interacting. It's quick. You get to see what they took away from it. And again, and then they retaught everything. They just reiterated 20 times what they learned that day. So I love doing stuff like that. And then this one, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this one. I love showing things visually. So I'm going to ask you another question. This is for any time you have something that works on a spectrum. I like to call them sticky note spectrums. Yes, I called it that. I named it. I don't know why. So this one is anything that you do on a spectrum. So I like to use pricing with it. I have no idea the answers I'm going to get here. So we're just going to go with it. This is going to be for your sticky notes. I'm going to give you a little vague vague instructions and say that you can answer with one sticky note, or if you have really different ideas and answers from your group, you can use as many as you want. So in a minute, I'm going to put the question on the screen, and you're going to come up here and put your answer. You're going to write your answer on your sticky note, put it somewhere along the spectrum. Here's your question. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. How much would you pay in cash to magically have everything graded and to never have to grade anything that you didn't want to again in your life? From 0 to a bajillion T. How much would you pay? You have 2 minutes. I don't know the answer, but let's do this. You can do it either way. You can do one per group on this one, or if you have different answers, you can do as many sticky notes as you wanted. Is there any way to boost this volume a little bit, guys? I did this way this time. Sometimes you can just do it down a wall and say this is 0, this is 10. You can even have them stand up along the front. Like, it's just the idea of it, that we're getting them moving, they're all discussing, and also it gives us a visual. That's good. I'll bring that back. I like you, like you're asking us. This is, sometimes I forget.
Very interesting. So this is really helpful because some of the stuff I'm doing, like, I just randomly came up with it.
Yeah, well, and some of this stuff too. 1 minute, 1 minute.
So I think these count.
Okay, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. Oh, they're hearing us on. It was great to meet her. That's right. She's got to head out, but she's awesome. You have, okay, we'll speed it up because you guys are super. Starting to know it already, huh? Oh yeah, I kind of cut corners there just a little bit. So the reason why I like this is a couple of different things. It woke the class up. You're all interactive and like you're doing something. Everyone talk to someone about it. And then I can take this a million different directions. Now, Jen had a great question up here. How do we, like, do you have to have a spectrum up? Do you have to put it on the board? You can say that end of the wall is 0, that end of the wall is 100. I've sent one representative up from each group and lined them up front and like use the people to, you can do it so many different ways. The point is we're taking it beyond just, well, what was your answer? Now, what was your answer? Now I can take this to you and say, okay, guys, my group back here, I want you to look at that on the wall. What does that tell you? What does it tell you looking at it visually? What do you think? People love grading, or there's that really hate grading. It's all over the place. This is something they would never say that fancy, but they might. I mean, your students would. Oh, I did not mean to insult my students that way. I'm sorry. It would be. That's true. But there are so many different ways. Now I have a different opportunity than I would have had just talking or asking one question and getting a few answers from the groups. Also, if I said, well, what is this? Well, what do you take away from this, guy? Like, what do you see when you look at this? And I get the silence. What do I do then? You probably guess. I could immediately go back to like, all right, 30 seconds. Don't worry, I'm not going to, but I could easily say, okay, 30 seconds. What's your one takeaway from this? Write it on your boards, and I could have them hold it up or one person from each group stand up. It's just, we use them over and over, but it's always there, that kind of tool in your back pocket. So it's fun. Like, I'm having fun. It just makes me feel different as an instructor too, really, honestly. People think, oh, this is harder to do this, but really it feels like there's less pressure on me because like students, sometimes I think, I realize they have great insights too, and sometimes they surprise me. I'm like, that's actually a good answer. Like they'll do like that, and I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought of that as a teacher. You just won the teaching moment, and they love it because I was like, I would have never guessed that. That's a great answer. So these are just some different ways that we add all these different things in together. Some other things, I love to add a competitive element. We already talked about that. At the very least, if you don't do some sort of competition, one thing I get feedback on a lot is I do weekly shout outs even from my online group. I'll look at their work and I'll do a short weekly shout out just to give them recognition. And you'd be surprised. I hear them later like, well, we got that shout out week 2, or you hadn't talked about us. We're like, we need to step up our game. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize. I didn't realize that it meant that much to them. So even those intrinsic motivators for doing this engagement, if you have a behavior you want, reward it. I actually have a badge. We have a badge for oh shoot, what's the nice one? Community spirit. We have a community spirit badge. If they help other teams or do something that's not ridiculous, you know, if they, or that one week before a game that half my class walked out, the ones that were left, I'm like, and you're all getting badges, points for you all. It's just a way, if we want that behavior, let's find a way to reward it. At the very least, say something and recognize it. And then kind of finishing things up, just to kind of talk about what, just to kind of mention a few things that we've been doing here. What time is it? I like to have, if you have a large class and they're working on something, I like to have some way for them to visually show that they're done. Because otherwise I'm like, are you still talking about the case? Are we on to football games? What are we doing? So there are some different ways that you can do this. Even there was one time I made those little Casa Bonita flags that they raised when they were done. But just some way that they can say, okay, when you're done, put the board down. When you're done, do this. That way I know it's a way to keep things going smoothly and not lose the class. And then this visual feedback. This is, believe it or not, I like to do this when I'm teaching. Sometimes picture the early morning class, they're half asleep, and you're looking at them and you're thinking, are they confused by this? Are they sleepy? Did they just break up with their boyfriend? Are they hungover? I can't tell what that look means. And you're just up there talking. You're like, how long do I go? So one thing I do is I'll say, okay, how well do you understand this concept, 1 to 5? And I know it sounds like a cheat thing, like they're always going to say 5, but sometimes they say 2 or 3. And it's a way for them to interact. And sometimes I've been explaining and they're like, Kenda, got this. And I'm like, great, we'll go on to the next thing. They actually like it. I'm not saying they control my class, because they don't. They do not control my class, but it does give a little bit of like, okay, and I'll explain to them, hey guys, sometimes it's, I can't tell what you're thinking right now. Give me a 1 to 5. And sometimes they're like 2. Okay, what about it? Let's talk about that. And that way the rest of the class is like, oh, our classmates do not understand. We need to talk about this some more. How do we feel about that one, guys? Is that still a little 1 to 5? How do we feel about that one? Oh gosh, I feel like everyone's giving me a high five there. Whew, okay. So that's one thing. Also with the boards, sometimes I'll do this for almost like a little testing. I've taught a concept and they're like, oh, we all understand it. We understand it. So be like, okay, if you're sending an item to press, what DPI is it supposed to be? Hold it up on your boards. And suddenly you're like, okay, they do not, in fact, know that. You lied to me. We're going to talk about it again. So I like to do that not only to get creative answers, but to see if they even know, to see if they can remember. Sometimes at the beginning of class, I'll do a quick recap from last time. Okay, guys, you know, which P of marketing means this? Boom, on the boards. I can see where they're at. I can get a gist of the classroom of how well they're picking it up. And then I will say this and I think I'll finish with this one. On mistakes the first round is I didn't have enough structure at first, and then I kind of compensated by just enabling them on things. So I realized there's a balance between, if you're doing activities and cases, give them structure and then say, I'll figure that part out. Figure out where your value points are as well. When you talked about prepping, this was my main thing from that is on the second one, find your point of value. There were some things I was doing that was not necessary to the learning of the class. At first, I was printing everything out, putting them in these fancy folders, stamping them with old-timey case file things, and like I had the whole thing, and I had secret clues, and it was exhausting. And I realized like those things they didn't care about, and I had to figure out what do they actually care about. So that part of that is tricky. Is like your prep time. My prep time went from hours to 5 to 10 minutes when I figured it was hard because it was like my baby I was throwing away. But it's like this piece is the prep time that's actually necessary. This thing they don't actually care about. They want to work on it in a Google Doc. So on prep time, it's figuring out what is necessary for the running of it smoothly and what doesn't add value. If you turn this into large activities, please do peer evaluations. That was one of my biggest mistakes. That is probably what made the students most angry I've ever seen them in my life. For the large classes, I have some templates for group contracts that I use now. I'd be glad to share those with you. We do those about 2 or 3 weeks in, and then we do peer evaluations based on those, set clear expectations. It does not solve every single problem, but it helps, and it gives them a way to at least vent, or it gives them a system to solve the situation. So if you start going fully into team-based learning and engagement, and you make things worth points that are group activities, please do a peer evaluation, set that up. It will help a lot, and I can provide any resources for that. And then the last thing, as you're saying, well, I don't know if this would work for class. I just tried some new activities that didn't go so well overseas, in my overseas class, because it was my first time doing them. And I just guessed wrong on a couple of things. And so what I did was I said, hey, I want to make this class interactive. It takes me more work, but I want it to be a better learning experience. I haven't done this one before, so we're going to have a chat round at the end of it to what we can improve for the next semester, because I want to make this class awesome, and you gotta try new things, and it may not go so. Let's try it. And one of them went really wrong. Like I guessed way wrong on it. It was like charades, and it was just bad. But at the end we said, okay, that didn't work, but I think if we switched it to this, and we had a brainstorm round, and we changed it for the next round. But yeah, you got to pivot. You got to try. You can't just not try some of this stuff. So I would suggest on one of the classes, say, hey, you guys are going to be my pilot round on this. Let's figure out a way to make this amazing. And it's worked for us. Usually they're pretty understanding if they know, hey, when you complain class is boring, let's fix that. Give me some feedback. I'm going to, and then presentations. If you guys have any presentations, I've switched to them creating video presentations instead of doing presentations at the front of class. For the really large classes, we have them do like a 3-minute presentation, submit the video, and then we'll pick winners, play those at the front of the class, and then they answer after the video plays. Just for my really large classes. Did that make sense? 1 to 5. How clear was that? Did that make sense? Okay. On the class where we had 55 teams, they couldn't all present. They could have, but good Lord. So we had them submit 4-minute presentation videos. We watched them. We picked the top 5 to 10, and we played those videos. We would have this group come to the front, play the video, so there's no PowerPoint time. Oh, we can't figure this out. Where do we go? Play the video and then answer right after their video played. That's for my super large classes. In the small classes, the thing is, in the small classes, you've got more room. You can do those things normally. When it gets large, you have to be a little bit more creative to figure out how do we still get that engagement. And we also, I like to do compilations of if I have a huge class and they've submitted ideas, I'll take a compilation of the best ones. Even if you think putting it on a PowerPoint file of pictures and have it going before class, you'd be surprised how much they flip out when their project comes up on the screen. So, okay. I know I went through that last part pretty quick, but I wanted to leave some time for questions, or I didn't tell you to write down the questions on cards, but questions or comments on tips or ideas that you want to tell us. Okay, yes. So I have a set of countdown videos I'd be glad to share. I have really low resolution ones that you can use on PowerPoints. For these, if I'm using a full screen one, I'll use a higher quality file and just do the whole screen. But the way I did it on here, all I did was, it's just like you insert a video onto your PowerPoint. So I insert the countdown video on the PowerPoint, use the low resolution file because it's smaller, and hit play on the video. So, just any other questions? All right. Well, you know what? We gotta finish this out, right? I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. We're gonna do this. 30 seconds. Each group. 1 sentence takeaway. What's the most important thing? If you were to tell someone else, what's the most important thing from this workshop? Best tip, most important thing to take away. As soon as you have an answer, have one person in your group stand up with the board, write the answer on the board. One person from each group, stand up with the board when you have the answer. Do we have a way to get their email addresses? Or stand up as soon as you have your answer. Stand up with it. And we're going to go around the room real quick. One sentence takeaway. Back row, you ready? All right, what do you have? As quick as you can. Say it out loud for us.
Get whiteboards. Most of the
Okay. What's your answer? You got to say it out loud for us. We can. Okay. Create competition. Visual cues. What do you have? Okay. The reason why I like to do this is because in the really large classes, they can't read the boards, and I actually have them shout them out, and we'll do a whole class usually in less than a minute. And also, this let me know that you guys really like the competitive element and a few things. Are you drawing the winner right now, or how are we doing it? Okay. Here's what I'd like to do. I know we're wrapping up the conference. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you want me to go ahead and email you those resources that I was talking about, I'll go ahead and collect your Okay. Okay. All right. If you haven't put your email address in somewhere, just come up to me and write it down, and I'll go ahead and email you guys with all the resources that I have. So, any other questions? I know we're ending a little early, but you're going home and heading out. So, thank you for being here. I'll send you the resources. You guys have been a great class. You've been so fun. Thank you. I can't take those whiteboards home, so if anybody wants them, you can actually take them with you. So, thank you guys. You're awesome. This is fun.